Anyone who's played Baldur's Gate 3 Early Access will have noticed that among the race choices, one doesn't just have a choice of Drow versus other elf types, but additionally, so-called Lolth Sworn Drow versus Seldarine Drow. And there appear to be some meaningful interactions in the game regarding this. But more importantly, as these are actually fairly distinct choices, everyone can benefit from knowing just what these terms mean and what the differences between the two are. But for that, we need to take a little dive into the lore and history of the elves of the Forgotten Realms. Let us begin with what the Seldarine are. The term is Elvish for brothers and sisters of the wood, and it is the description given to the gods of the elves, led by one Corellin the Rethian. Long ago in the Dawn Age, there was once a goddess of the elves called Araushnee the Weaver, elven goddess of destiny, artisans, who was named Keeper of Fate of the Dark Elves. She was the lover and consort of Corellin the Rethian, the head of the elfin pantheon, who had been completely taken in by her beauty and seductive charm, so much so that he was blind to her actions, whatever she might have done. She bore her consort 2 children, the twin gods Viran and Elistre, and appeared at least superficially content with her role. But appearances can be deceiving. Secretly, Araushnee bore her consort and lord resentment, and nursed petty grudges, which would soon turn deadly, as they turned to greed, envy, and utter cruelty. This first manifested with Araushnee aiding the orc guide Gruumsh against Corellin by trying to kill her husband by imbuing the scabbard that he had crafted for his sword with magic that would cause the weapon to shatter during the fight. However, this plan failed as Sehanine Moonbow, the goddess of the moon and dreams, intervened, preventing the magic from taking effect. Later on, Araushnee pressured and cajoled Malar the Beast Lord into attacking Corellin, but the god handily defeated the Beast Lord, all the while remaining blind to Araushnee's true intentions, still smitten by her beauty and charm. Araushnee's final plan involved gathering a host of gods with hostile intentions toward Corellin and the Seldarine, in an effort to form an army to assault Avandor, the realm of the elf gods, to overthrow Corellin. It is said that the army was so poorly organized that Araushnee was confident it would fail in its efforts. Her true plan was to give the magically cursed scabbard to Corellin, as it had been newly enchanted, such that during the battle, arrows shot by their daughter Elistre would strike him in the chest instead of the enemy, slaying him and turning her into a scapegoat in the process, deflecting any possible blame away from Araushnee. But Sehanine, savvy to Araushnee's intentions, confronted the goddess about her plans, as she had recognized her to be a traitor. But Corellin, blinded by his love for Araushnee, could not be told this. Thus, Sehanine attempted to stop Araushnee on her own. Araushnee was already wise to this, and together with her son Viran, imprisoned the goddess, ensuring that Elistre would find the scabbard and deliver it to her father. With Sehanine imprisoned, Araushnee's plot nearly went as planned, as more and more gods of evil joined her cause out of pure hatred for the Seldarine. When an evil deity charged and incapacitated Corellin, Elistre attempted to save her father by swiftly emptying her quiver, but as the Weaver had planned, the arrows were drawn to Corellin, nearly killing him. Despite all of this, the Seldarine managed to defeat the bulk of the army assembled against them, albeit at terrible cost. In a state of frustration, Araushnee attempted to finish off Corellin with a vial of poison crafted by Elistre to aid her followers in the hunt, pretending it was water from the plain of Elysium, with healing properties. But this too failed, as the goddess Sehanine broke free from her prison and joined together with the elven goddesses Airdrie Fenya and Hinali Salanil, goddess of air and weather and goddess of love respectively, to form the triune deity known as Ungarad for the first time, using their combined divine power to heal the god, saving his life. When Corellin finally came to, a trial was convened, where Viran and Araushnee were found guilty of high treason. Viran was sent into exile, and Elistre, despite not being truly culpable, voluntarily went into exile, foreseeing the need that dark elves might have one day of hope and light. Despite being forgiven by her father, she insisted. Araushnee, however, was forever banished, and transformed into a monstrous spider-like creature, stripped of her divinity, and sent to the abyss as a Tanari, a demon. And yet, despite all that had happened, Corellin could not bring himself to execute the goddess, and so could only banish her. Hereafter, Araushnee called herself Lolth, and conquered the 66th layer of the abyss, renaming it the Demon Web Pits, and quickly consolidated power for herself in the abyss, however reduced it was. Millennia had passed, and Lolth sought to regain her former power, and even surpass it. She had some success by corrupting a few dark elves, but it was not until she discovered her son Viran's handiwork that an actionable plan occurred to her. Lolth became interested in the world called Toril. She sensed the presence of Viran, at the time the major deity in Ilithir, an ancient dark elven kingdom, and her attention was drawn there. Lolth began to send demonic agents to corrupt the Dark Elves of Ilithir, seeking to gain both worshippers and consequently divine power, but also to turn them away from the other major elven subraces, the Gold Elves, the Moon Elves, and the Wood Elves, and thus to sow the seeds of conflict. Originally, Ilithir and the other elven nations were not openly hostile to each other, but Lolth, through cunning and craft, poisoned this relationship by causing wars and strife. This led the other elves to shun the Dark Elves, going so far as to create a Dark Elf-free piece of land. These elves caused the First Seldarine, which split a region of the continent from the mainland in order to create an island out of it, using incredibly powerful elven high magic and forming the Isle of Evermeet, a process which claimed countless victims due to natural disasters and reshaped the continent of Faerun. Veyron's efforts to remedy this and repair the damage done were undermined by the ongoing conflict between him and Illustrae for the hearts of the Dark Elves, which led to diminished influence for both of them, granting Lolth the opportunity to fill the void. Rapidly, Lolth began to gain in power and reacquired her divine status that had been stripped from her by Corellon and the Seldarine. The Spider Queen then began her greatest plot, one that would eventually lead to the Crown Wars. The Crown Wars were a series of multi-generational elven wars that raged over a period of 3,000 years in the early history of Faerun, with intermittent periods of peace. The Crown Wars were made up of 5 separate yet interconnected conflicts that took place over these 3,000 years. In the end, the result was our current understanding of Drow and elf relations, nearly destroying the entirety of the elven race in the process. As the Dark Elves had already been ostracized by the other elves, Lolth took full advantage of this to further draw them into her influence. During this time, Lolth used a demon agent, a Baldur called Wendunai, to seduce a powerful Dark Elven family and ruling clan of the Ilithir into her worship by granting them powerful and evil magics. As time and the Crown Wars went on, more and more Dark Elves were seduced to the side of evil and lulled into the worship of Lolth. Under the influence of Lolth, as well as other evil gods associated with the Drow, the Dark Elves had effectively become absolute pariahs among the elves. Endless bloody conflict led to more and more destruction, as the Dark Elves moved further and further away from the path of good, openly worshipping Lolth and other evil gods, and committing unbelievable atrocities against their elven brethren. So great were these crimes that the other elves sent a plea to Corellon, protector and creator of the elves, to aid them in a powerful magic ritual that would forever change the destiny of the elven nations. Elven high mages and clerics cast a mighty spell of elven high magic, transforming all Dark Elves indiscriminately, whether good or evil, into Drow as we understand them today. Due to this magic, the Dark Elves could no longer comfortably live under sunlight and on the surface, and the spell had the additional effect of binding the Dark Elves to a strange radiation of the Underdark called Fersres, which is a byproduct of truly ancient magic that originally helped shape the Underdark into what it is today, tying their abilities to this radiation. The vulnerability to sunlight, as well as being bound to Fersres, forced virtually all Dark Elves to retreat underground and fully accept the Underdark as home, as well as the embrace of Lolth, the Spider Queen, as their primary patron. Not all Dark Elves departed, as some deities maintained that the Dark Elves should stay on the surface, albeit for different reasons. Veyron wished for the Drow to remain strong in terms of territory and influence, and his sister Illustrae wished for the Dark Elves to return to their roots and embrace goodness and light. But this was the beginning of the end, so to speak, and with this descent into the Underdark, the reputation of the Drow as cruel and evil was permanently solidified in the eyes of elvenkind and most surface dwellers. Coming back to Baldur's Gate 3, we have Lolth Sworn Drow and Seldarine Drow. But what does that mean in light of this history? Clearly, the implication of a Lolth Sworn Drow is that this Drow was raised in the Underdark, likely in one of the great Drow cities, and indoctrinated into the worship of Lolth. Such a Drow would have all the associations one typically assumes with Drow in general: cruelty, cunning, and untrustworthiness. There are a few relevant character interactions related to this in the game. Of course, ultimately, as the player, it is up to you as to how you conduct yourself as a Lolth Sworn Drow, whether you behave in a way that holds true to the reputation that precedes you, or very differently. The case of the Seldarine Drow is more complex, because, as a rule, most good Drow do not worship the traditional gods of the Seldarine, but almost exclusively Illustrae alone, although it is possible, assuming one of those gods accepts the worship of the respective Drow. The implication is more that a Seldarine Drow, a term not really used in actual D&D, is generally a good aligned being who lives on the surface, rather than someone who explicitly follows the deities of the Seldarine. The term Dark Seldarine exists as well, and encompasses all of the evil Drow deities, but that is obviously not what is meant by it. Hopefully, there will be some interesting and meaningful interactions for each of these subraces in the game, and I hope that this video helps you to better understand the history that preceded your Drow characters. As always, thank you for tuning in. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe as it really helps out the channel a lot, and I will check you out next time. Take care.